Here we go. Three, two, one. Hello, everybody. I'm Dean with the Two Party Podcast. You know me. I'm back again. Got another guest. It's been a very busy weekend, and I'm. This is one of the parts of the show I didn't tell you about, Jennifer. I am horrible with names, so I'm going to try your last name, and you're going to
All
tell
right.
me I did it wrong because I'm good at that. So here we go.
That's all right.
Jennifer Riem.
Wow. You got it first try.
This is the first. This is the first in
Well
podcast
done.
history for Two Party Podcast.
Well done. Now, can you pronounce my maiden name that's on the cover of the book? There's
That's
your challenge.
that is the challenge, and I saw it. Where is it? It's right here. Is it? It's not Jarnagan.
Dadgum. You're good.
Is it? Am I right?
You got it.
That's the first time in
You
Two
got
Party
it.
Podcast history I've got a name right. This is the
I like
first.
it when we make history.
This is
There
going to
you
be
go.
a good year. That's what this is. So again, I want to introduce you, welcome you to the show, Jennifer. I'd like you to do is just tell the audience about who you are, where you're from, and then we'll get into why you're here.
Very good. Well, so thank you for having me. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to share my story with anyone and everyone. So thank you very much. Like you said, my name is Jennifer Riem, and I'm here today because I created a children's book series called The Adventures of Twilla and Rye. Um, the origin story of the books kind of takes me back to where I'm from, which is Winslow, Arkansas.
Okay.
I was there, say, 10 years ago, and I was sitting on a friend's back porch, and their back porch just looks out to woods. Winslow, Arkansas is the tiniest of dots on a
Yeah.
map, but it was a magical place to grow up. Anyway, so I'm at my friend's house and I'm looking out at these woods, and out of the universe, these two names kind of came into my brain, Twilla and Rye. I didn't know who they were, what they were. I knew rye bread. That's
Right.
about the
Right.
equivalent. But something told me those names were really important.
Significant. Yeah.
So I tucked them away and just carried on. At the time, I had been a teacher for about 10 years. I've taught 20 years in Oklahoma.
What did you teach?
So I started out teaching second grade,
Uh-huh.
and then I moved into teaching a multi-age class, which was first and second graders combined, which
You
was
had your hands full.
hands full, but it was so much fun.
Yeah,
So
of
much
course,
fun.
of course. The littles are
Um,
always fun.
Littles are always fun, but as my husband and I had our children, I kind of had to, I couldn't teach the same age that I was coming home to
Right.
every night.
You
If
needed
I
a
wanted
break.
to be
Yeah.
a good parent and a good teacher, I needed some sort of break there.
Yep.
Um, so I migrated up to teaching seventh grade math
Hmm.
and coaching cross country.
There you go.
And I did that for 7 years, and I absolutely loved it. But I want to be a writer
Yeah.
my whole life. I wanted to be a storyteller, something in
Hmm.
that realm. I felt artistic. I can't draw for anything.
Right.
Um, but I have this creativity in my brain. I have a very vivid imagination.
Yeah. There you go.
Um, so I just something kind of happened, and it was like the story started growing in my head. I realized I have characters. These names, Twilla and Rye,
Hmm.
had been resting in my head for years. And this is May of 2022, I'm taking you into now.
Okay.
And we were speaking earlier of all of the flooding that was
Yeah.
happening in
Yep.
Oklahoma at that
Hmm.
time. So I was at a friend's house, and she pretty much told me, I know you love teaching, but she said, I hear you talking about all these things you want to do. And she said, I think there's so much more for you. And that gave me the courage to push myself outside of my little comfort zone, which I was
Yep.
very comfortable in.
It's great to have people support and push us when we don't see ourselves. Sometimes we don't see it in ourselves. Sometimes it takes that little nudge.
Oh, 100%. And that's exactly what I needed. I am very good at remaining in a comfortable place.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
don't we all want that, right? It's you the
right?
comfort of come home and just relax, and it's
Give
always the
me
same
pillows and
stable.
warm
It's
laundry and I'll never move.
yeah, that's it. It's
It's my
consistent.
happy
Yeah.
place. So, but she encouraged me to take a leap. And so once I was finally able to come home from the floodwaters receding,
Right.
I came home and told my husband, what if I give this whole writing thing a shot? Um, I think I could do it. I've written for some different magazines
Mhm.
here in town. I just felt like if there was ever a time, it was now.
That was it. Yeah.
So my husband is the most supportive person in
That's
my
what
life.
that was one of my next questions is how was he receptive to it? So it
He
sounds
was
like he
so
was very
receptive to
supportive.
it.
Awesome.
Very, very supportive.
Awesome.
Really, my whole family was. I think they've watched me and listened to me
Hmm.
have all of these ideas for so long that they were like, finally, go do it.
Yeah,
You know, it's time to give it a try.
that's awesome.
So we gave it a go. And the stories, I knew I had the character names,
Hmm.
but then it was like, okay, well, that's this much of
Right.
it. Where are these stories going to take place?
At this
I
point, you
can't
have
draw like
years in your head. You have years of stuff to write.
right, right. And so I started thinking if I'm going to write something, everything I write has meaning to me.
Hmm.
It's special to me. And I can only write authentically. I it's just how I'm programmed.
Hmm.
So in our family, our one of our absolutely most favorite things are national parks,
Right.
which sounds silly, but if you love them like we do,
Hmm.
there's just something so organic and real and comfortable. There's
Yep.
my word comfortable again about being in a national park.
Always. Yeah. Growing
It
up, I'd give you a little bit of history on my childhood. So when we lived, we originally came from Florida. We moved out to Oregon, Washington, California,
oh,
at a very young age, about 5 years old. The Northwest is so beautiful. And my mom, on the way out there, decided, she'd just been through a divorce. We were just moving out there. And on the way there, she decided, hey, we're going to hit every major stop. So we hit the Grand Canyon, we hit the Petrified Forest. We hit
yes,
every single major adventure that I mean, people don't really nowadays. I don't even hear kids talk about, these things. And
right.
my mom did that all the way there, transitioning from a divorce all the way out in the cross country with her kids. And she made that part of that transition. And then once lived out there, we lived out there from I was 5. I think I moved back to Florida about 15. But the whole time we lived in Oregon, every year when my mom would get a break, she worked 3 jobs. She was one of the first volunteer firefighters in Bonita, Oregon. She was a emergency room nurse, single mother, just doing her thing, teaching EMT. She was just went back to school. Really an amazing, transition of what she was doing with her life. And so, but the one thing that was important to her is to have these moments with her kids. And so when she had her PTO built up, every summer we would do an adventure of some sort. And it was usually, I can't tell you how many times I went to Alcatraz and Fisherman's Wharf. And
Oh my
those were the
gosh.
closest, road trips she could tolerate us in the car with without killing us. And so those were some of the ones we did a lot of. And then there was always the Oregon coast. There was always Bend, Cannon Beach. There was everything around Oregon day trips that we could do, she would do with us. So I get
That's
exactly where you're
incredible.
coming from on the national parks and just the adventures in general because that's kind of how
Mhm.
we grew up.
Well, that was so I mentioned earlier I grew up in Arkansas.
Yep.
The town I grew up in was a tiny town called Winslow, Arkansas. And growing up in the 80s,
Hmm.
there were 300 people in
Right.
my town and 95% of them I was related to.
I was gonna say
Um,
everybody knew everybody, and especially when you're related to them.
everybody. So it was this every day was a grand adventure. My best friend Lisa and I had four-wheelers from the time we were probably
Hmm.
5. And it was just a different time
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
a different place. These things we can't let our kids do today,
Oh yeah.
but
Culturally, everything's different. Yes.
it's so different.
Yep.
But we would take off on our four-wheelers or on our bikes. And truly, it was like the Goonies dream. We would
Yep.
be gone all day long. And there were, times where we would end up down on the railroad tracks and we would ditch our bikes and we would go walking through the train tunnel and
Uh-huh.
end up on, one of the bridges.
Yep.
And the movie like Stand By Me,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so much of that is like, was that part of the movie or was that part of my
That
childhood?
that
Because
was
that,
kind of my childhood out in Oregon because where we lived in Oregon, we were right by a lumber yard with a train track, and my
yeah,
mom would yell at me all the time because she was the local firefighter. Everybody knew her, and I was the kid that was, you're not supposed to be in the lumber yard. The logs are going to cave in on you. You're not supposed to be in the railroad. I was in trouble all the time doing that stuff, and they'd find me down, two cities over on the railroad track, wondering how I
right.
got there. It's just what we
No,
did.
my dad was the mayor, and my grandparents and then my aunt and uncle owned the town store.
So you were
My
always getting,
cousin was the postmaster general.
oh
My
yeah,
other uncle owned the gas station.
yeah.
So I couldn't do
You couldn't do
diddly
anything, get
squat
away with
without
it.
being tattled on. One of my favorite and least favorite stories was there was this, the old timers were my favorite.
Yep.
Um, I loved the old timers in my town. They're the reason I am the storyteller I am today. But one of our old timers, I called him Grandpa Dean, though we had absolutely
Yeah.
zero relation. I had a dirt bike when I was like 10,
Yep.
and I loved this dirt bike, but I hated this god awful helmet.
Helmet.
It was like the size of an astronaut helmet.
Yep.
There was no glass on the front, so it was just this big like egghead
Yeah.
helmet. So I was good to take my dirt bike. My daddy didn't care. My mama didn't care. I could take that dirt bike anywhere, but you got to wear your helmet, right?
Right.
I hated that thing. So I would take off on this old dirt road, Bunyard Road, and I would get so far, and there was a culvert.
Yeah.
And so I would take
Take
off the
that off.
helmet, ditch the helmet into the culvert because it was safe.
Right.
And then I would go about my hours of my
Yeah.
day just
Away,
riding
away from where everybody could find you.
far away from
Yeah.
anyone. So I'm coming back this one day and I stop at the culvert and I go down and oh shit, my helmet is gone. Like this is bad news. How
Right.
does
Somebody caught
this
on.
lose the helmet off their head?
Yep.
So I knew I was in deep. This was not going to go over well. Like, and there was only about a mile from the culvert to home
Right.
to concoct a really good story, but I was trying.
Yeah.
So I drive home, I pull into the driveway. Right there in front of our front door is Grandpa Dean's truck with my helmet right on the middle of it. I was screwed. I was like, I'm
Yep.
screwed. I'm completely screwed. So they all come outside, my mom, my dad, and Grandpa Dean. And Grandpa Dean is this like one of the greatest old timers ever. I mean, you got your Big Smith overalls. You're just your
Your
quintessential.
classic picture of what
Yes.
an
I
old
mean,
farmer
everything
guy
you can
hanging
think
out would
of.
be.
Right. It's him.
Yep.
And he was like, kids, you're not going to believe what I found in the culvert. And I was like, oh, dang, how'd that get there? I was looking for that thing. Luckily, everyone sort of had a sense of humor.
Right.
I didn't get in too much trouble. I was also a pretty good kid.
Right.
So I didn't get in too much trouble, but
It
I
was a
definitely,
learning moment.
yes. And I had to find a new hiding spot for the
Yeah,
helmet.
exactly.
Far away from Grandpa Dean's house because at that point I knew I was being watched.
Oh yeah. That's great. That's great. I love it. I like you said, the old timers. I've been in the senior industry now for probably 2.5 years. I've been back in it from construction and being on the road doing different stuff as a project manager. But for the past 2.5 years, I've been working as a director over facilities and operations for senior living in the local area. And so one of the things I'm passionate about is I love old people, right? Every old person that I work around in these communities or in the adult day centers we have, they're everybody's grandma and grandpa. And I was raised,
Right.
after my mom and I moved back to Florida, my grandfather got sick with cancer. He died in my arms. Great man. We had to take care of my grandma. So my mom was working all the time, and so I was always the one home with grandma. So kind of became grandma's boy, right? So I've always had a soft spot in my heart for all old people. I love them. I love kids, but I love old people. And they can crack you up. They can be ornery as heck. They can do anything they want to do. To me, I just get a kick out of it. I laugh about it. But I've been in that industry for a while, so I get exactly what you're saying. Like I've always had this care and need to make sure that old people are okay. Look after them. Be the advocate that
Absolutely.
can help. But that's what I've been doing for the past few years, and I love every bit of it. You hear these stories like you just told. I hear their side of it. Their stories about. I had one lady that was talking a couple weeks ago about the outhouses. She grew up in Arkansas. I don't know where, but she was talking about the
Oh
outhouses
yeah.
they used to have, and oh, they don't have no heat there. I think it was her AC went out, and I went over there to check to see if my maintenance guy showed up, and she goes, "Oh, it's fine if it takes a day or two. We didn't have any AC in or heat in our outhouses." And then she went into this whole story. And it was just hilarious. Then she tells me about how her sister went in there one time and there was a raccoon in it. And I mean, the stories that you hear from the old timers is just great. I mean, I love it. It's what keeps me in the
Absolutely.
industry. I just love them. It's so fun.
Well, and I have to tell you, so growing up in this small town, this is where the adventures of Twilla and Rye really started. It was
Hmm.
the adventures of my childhood. I had one of my closest friends, and her parents were incredible people. Her big brother was someone I always looked up to. Um, but they lived down in a holler, as we
Hmm.
say,
Yep.
and they had an outhouse. And so my daddy nicknamed her Pearly May. And so her
Right.
name is Pearl, but in my heart, she will always be Pearly May, and she
That's
knows this.
great.
Um, but when I would get the chance to go and stay with Pearly May and her family, um, like if you had to go to the bathroom,
That was it.
her, it was during the day, I was good to go by myself, but at night it was like, okay, who's walking me?
Uh-huh.
Because it was such an adventure, but it was so different because we lived in town,
Right.
um, as much as a town can be in
A
a
small town,
little city
yeah.
that small.
Correct.
But we had running water and
Yep.
electricity and plumbing and all this. So spending time with her family down in the holler was such a contrast from what
Yeah.
I grew up with. But
Yep.
it was also so normal to me
Hmm.
because that was just her family.
Yeah.
And
That was part of
really
the
that was
town
really
you were
Winslow.
growing in. Yeah.
Right. It was just
That's just
Winslow
one
is
of
this
those other
beautiful
things about the
puzzle.
town. Yeah.
Yeah. Winslow is this beautiful, 300-piece puzzle that each puzzle piece is a different family, but each family, without that family, the puzzle would not be
It wouldn't be
complete.
complete. Yeah, that's total
And
exactly.
and so growing up with those experiences made me, I think, such a more well-rounded person. And it brought all of these stories into my world, um, that I don't think a lot of people have the opportunity to experience.
Hmm.
We get so comfortable in our bubble
Yeah.
that we forget what everybody else's bubble looks like. And for me, and this is almost embarrassing to say, I didn't know what a neighborhood was growing
Right.
up.
Yeah. Because you just
I
had
I
property lines, right? You just had
right. I
fencing.
knew like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood,
Yeah.
but that was just some dude in his house with
Yeah.
a jolly little train and like cardigans. So it wasn't until I went to college at the University of Arkansas and one of my friends said, "Oh, my parents live in such and such neighborhood." And I was like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
And she drove me. And this, keep in mind, Fayetteville was only about 30 minutes from where I grew up,
Yep.
but I my world was
Was
Winslow.
Winslow.
And
Yeah.
so seeing a neighborhood of all these houses,
Right. Stacked
just like
together.
side by side, I was like, this is very, like, you guys are so close.
Yeah. Yeah.
How
This
can
is
you
a
live
little bit
so close to one
overboard.
another?
Yeah.
And then, that was their whole world's
Yep.
experience. They didn't know anything but neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So then I bring those friends to Winslow and they're like, good God, you can't even yell at
Yeah.
your neighbor. They're
It's
not
a
going to hear
real
you. They're so
culture
far
shock.
away.
Yeah.
Right. So it was such a gift to grow up in a place like Winslow because the town is magical
Yep.
to me. It always will be. The people were as magical, and their stories
Yeah.
were so vivid and real. And every person in my mind, every person I grew up with is a character in my story.
Right.
The old timers that I grew up with in my parents' pool hall, you know, they would come in every Saturday morning and get their cups of coffee.
Yeah.
and just start
Very
talking.
routine. Yeah.
So routine. And I was this little kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, that would bring the coffee pot and fill up their
Love
cups
it.
of
I
coffee
love it.
and then just plop down.
Wait till the
And
next person come
what are you
in.
going to tell me today?
Yeah.
What are you going to tell me today?
It's amazing. It's amazing.
So
You
that's
know,
really, that's how, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good. I've lived in 40 of the 50 states. I've worked all over for 28 years in construction. So I've seen a lot of the United States. And it's amazing, like you said, it's the culture differences when you go to each community. Everywhere I've gone, working or even just living, um, you try to integrate yourself in that community, however best you can fit in and just get yourself out there. And sometimes you want to lay low because it's not the nicest community. And sometimes it's like, well, this is a pretty nice community. I want to be involved. I want to be in the forefront. And it is definitely really unique to go. When I lived in Oregon, we lived in Eugene and Springfield. Then we lived in Veneta, which was at that time, it was a very small lumberyard type of town. Um, all over Portland, Lake Oswego, Beaverton, all over those areas. But in Florida, when we moved back there, we moved in, like I said, we initially moved in to help my grandma with my grandfather. That was in Odessa, Florida. And when we moved back, even in 91, Odessa, Florida was still a very little town. My mom and dad literally were married under the tree in the backyard of this property of my grandma and grandpa's. They were the second house or second property put in that subdivision when they first bought it 40, almost 50 years now ago. And so when I moved there in 91, I went from Eugene, Oregon and Springfield. And back then it was kind of just getting built up to being a city that it is now. So when we moved to Odessa, Florida, it was, I'm moving from the Wild West out here down to redneck town, Florida. And it
Yeah.
was. And I mean, I went to school. I was in fights every day. I tell my mom, I hate it here, man. I'm in fights every day with these rednecks because I have this different accent. But it was like you said, it was a very small town. Everyone knew everyone. My grandma and grandpa, after my grandpa died, my grandma drank a lot. She didn't leave the house much. My grandpa worked for GTE, he was on the road a lot. So he just sent money home and he traveled to Panama and all around the world for GTE. But when he finally came home, he was sick and he was passing. And so they only had a few years actually to live their marriage together. And it was when he passed, it wasn't a change as far as him being home with her because she was used to that. She was still a drinker. And he was, even though he was on the road. I was sent to the store to get alcohol for her cigarette cartons. I had to go buy, she literally, the old school stories you hear, I'd get a list and I'd go to her local
Oh,
liquor
yeah.
store. I got my license at 15 to do that. The state of Florida gave me my license at 15 as a hardship license to help my grandma. And I would drive. I was the only kid in school that could drive. And I'd drive myself to school. And then I'd get a call in the middle of the day. My grandma was out of vodka or bourbon. I had to go to the liquor store. I'd get pulled out of school to go to the liquor store. But it was that small town, like you said. We knew everybody. There was a little restaurant called Renito's right at the end of the road. My grandma loved a good cheeseburger from Renito's, so I'd get a call out of school. I'd have to go get grandma her lunch from, that's what she wanted that day. She didn't want to cook. Just very unique small town. And now Odessa is, I mean, there's houses back to back, wall to wall. If you want to buy a house there, they're up in almost $1 million range. It's just crazy what it's turned into. But it was like you said, it was the adventure. There's lakes all around. We were swimming in the lakes as kids with gators and everything around us. Didn't phase us. It was just the adventure. It was like, man, we want to go swimming. It's hot out. We dive in the lake. But there was woods around and cypress forests and things to get into. It was very unique. It was very cool.
That's
Um, so it's great to hear. Like, I love hearing that that's what's kind of inspired this whole thing that's got you into these books. Let's jump into these books. Tell me, let's start with just going chronological. Let's go with your first one and how that started, and let's phase into all. Let's talk about all of them.
so the first book, I decided I wanted my characters to be homed in my favorite national park. And my favorite national park has always been Sequoia National Park because of the big, beautiful trees. And my dad told me about those trees for the first time when I was probably about 9 years old.
By the
Um,
way, we went there last weekend
did
when
you?
it was really windy, me and my wife, because
Yes.
we're 15 minutes away from our house here in Wagner. We're 15 minutes away. And we literally jumped in the car. I told my wife, I said, I
Well,
gotta
now
get out of
you're
the house.
thinking Sequoia, Oklahoma.
What?
You're thinking Sequoia,
Oh yeah,
Oklahoma.
yeah.
I'm Sequoia National Park
You're
in
talking the big
California.
real one.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. These the ones that don't even seem real.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So go
uh
ahead.
we went, my husband took myself and our kids back in 2016 for the first time. And I have a picture that I take when I go into schools and do readings of me like hugging
Oh, those
this.
trees are massive. I've been out
They're
there
just,
multiple times.
they're
Yeah.
so difficult to describe, but in the
Hmm.
books, part of what I love that I get to do is the books are unique with the fact that every page in the book, the background, um, for every illustration is an actual photograph
Right.
from the part that that book is set in.
So real quick, do you do your own illustration or you have someone doing that?
So I do all of the photography, I do all of the writing.
Awesome.
My daughter actually originally drew all of the characters,
Really?
whereas
That's
I
cool.
really suck as
That's right. You mentioned
an
that.
artist. I am a great writer. I can write a
Yep.
great story. I can tell a great story. I can barely draw stick people. But my daughter has always, from the time she was very little,
Yep.
she's very
Has that very
creative
good
and
art.
artistic.
Very cool.
So I kind of went to her and said, when I finished a Festival of the Pines, I said, "Hey, kiddo, how would you feel about drawing mommy's characters?" And she said, "I can try."
Yep.
And so I read her the story and I gave her zero direction. At that point, she knew, the characters are not fairies. I named them
Right.
tree sprites
Hmm.
because they live in the big, beautiful trees.
Yep.
So they're kind of fairy adjacent.
Yeah.
Um, we say that tree sprites are very much like fairies, but they're also like me and you.
Yeah.
They don't do magic, but they can fly.
Hmm.
So Jenna, my daughter, listened to the story and she internalizes everything. And she was like, okay. So she goes off to her room and she comes back with, I can't get a full sheet of paper. She like has torn off this little piece of paper out of her sketchbook and she had drawn Rye,
Okay.
my boy tree sprite.
Yep.
And oh my God, he was perfection. He was
Right.
exactly how I envisioned him. And I was like, this is
This
fantastic.
is it.
How
Yeah.
about Twilla? And so she goes off about 20 minutes later. She comes back with another scrap piece of paper because, again, I can't get the whole full sheet. So I get this scratch piece of paper, and Twilla was wonderful. So I was just like, this is it. I was like, you
Yeah.
nailed it. Do you want to draw all of the characters?
I
And
was gonna
so,
say, all of a sudden you're like, I have an illustrator in the
yeah,
family.
she was hired. She was hired. So she was 14 at the time. So she
That's
didn't have
awesome.
the capability or knowledge to turn those pencil sketches
Right.
into, you know, something that we can put on a photograph in the
Hmm.
book. So I then was able to reach out to a graphic designer.
Yep.
And the graphic designer we used on book one um, is someone we just use the one time. But now I have this graphic designer that's local here in Oklahoma. His name is Dusty Ribel.
Okay.
And oh my gosh, it's like he and I,
He,
his
he can
vision, he
visualize
just
what you're
gets it.
giving him information
He
on.
completely gets it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't do the work in book one, but he's done books two, three, and four, and he'll
That's
do the
awesome.
rest. He is completely bought in, and
Nice.
yeah, I am so lucky to have him on the team.
Yeah.
So book one
That's
is
amazing.
is where you meet the tree sprites and you kind of learn what they are,
Hmm.
and you'll learn when you go into the series, because I was in education for 20 years. I had to put educational facts in there
Yes.
and I had to teach something along the way. So every page at the bottom of book one, we call them pine cone facts because
Nice.
there's a little pine cone icon and then some sort of little
Fact
factoid
about it. Yeah.
about the park, or, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of describing the location, like
Yep.
Sequoia National Park is in the Sierra Nevada
Yep.
region. So little things like that.
I think that brings a story like this together, for younger kids reading and then having the facts in there, you're transitioning that fantasy and reality together. And I think it brings the whole thing together when you add
Exactly.
actual data, like geographical facts that you're
Right.
adding. That makes sense. For
Between
some
that
people's
and the
minds,
actual
that's just a good
photographs.
bond.
Exactly. So I like to say that I blend imagination with information.
Yeah. And that's
And so
perfect. And, and
it's
and that makes a story so much better, right? Because you
right.
can
It makes it
visualize
so
the
much more
reality. Some people are very real and some people are
Yes.
very imaginative. And so when
Yes.
you can put those two together in a story, that story is going to keep them involved.
Exactly. And that's the crazy thing. When I go into schools, I'll have librarians or principals say, "What age range do you read to?" And I honestly, I've never had a book series that has done this before, but I read to pre-K
Yep.
all the way through fifth grade.
Which is awesome.
And it's wild that they are all drawn to the stories for different reasons.
Yep.
Um, but they're all captivated, and these kids will come up to me, and the littles especially love the visual of the characters. They
Yep.
love Twilla and Rye's big eyes, and um, which eyes are something that just draw
Of
little
course.
kids in.
Yeah.
And so Twilla and Rye have these beautiful, very soulful,
Yep.
excited eyes. And then you've got kids that are a little bit older that really get into the pictures. And
Hmm.
so they're like, wait, I see someone on that picture. And I'll say, well, yeah, these national parks, I've traveled to all of them. So when I took the pictures, there were people in the background.
Yeah.
And I leave all of that in the picture because that makes it even more authentic.
So a lot of your backgrounds are your photography that you're taking as
Every
you're
single
traveling.
one,
Everyone.
every
That's
single
amazing.
page is a
That's amazing.
photograph that I took.
That's so
So
cool. That's
I
really
say
cool.
that there was one photograph that my husband took because we had to etch me out of it. So, so I should give him a little bit of photography
Right.
credit. So there's that one picture in book one that
We'll,
Jason
we'll
took.
make sure he gets some royalties out of the deal.
Right, for sure. For sure.
I love it.
Um, but yeah, so book one was set in Sequoia National Park. And then book two, I really just kind of do these um, with the parks that I think would embrace the stories and
Hmm.
where I feel a good story can be told.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's a whole backstory with that as well. But book two is called The Wishing Bridge, and that's set in Arches National Park.
Okay.
And the Wishing Bridge is Delicate Arch.
Yep.
Um, but kind of the to side story here for just a second. Right after I wrote book one, right before book one was coming out, I got sick. So I had something, my body just started malfunctioning.
Right.
Things weren't working the way I knew they should be working. I was very healthy. I was an Ironman triathlete.
I read that
And
about you. That's amazing. Yep.
yeah. So I was getting ready to start training for another event at the start of 2023. And I got in these great new tennis shoes.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, let's go start marathon training. And my feet were so heavy. And I was like, well, these stupid shoes,
Yeah. Got to
these
be the
shoes
shoes,
are
right?
obviously the worst shoes ever. It's not
Got to
me,
be
it's
the
the shoes.
shoes.
Gotta be the shoes. So I go and exchange the shoes. And I get like this super expensive pair of Hokas. And I'm like, all
Hmm.
right, Hokas, these are going to make me fly
This
like,
is what everyone's
an
wearing.
eagle. I'm
Yeah.
going to soar. Not only did my feet not want to go, but my energy level was
Right.
gone. So I was like, this is not me.
Yeah.
I've been an athlete since I was 3 years old. This
Yeah.
is weird.
Something's not right.
Something's off. So I started going to massage therapists, chiropractors, you name it, the gamut. Um, and everything just kept deteriorating. And
Hmm.
it was like deteriorating faster and faster. And by deteriorating, I mean neuropathy. So
Right.
I not only
Wow.
lost feeling in my feet, it was like every week the numbness in my legs inched up another inch or two.
Right.
And then I started noticing the numbness in my hands inching up.
Yep.
So then it was a matter of this is more than just,
Yeah. This isn't something
it's
a
not a sore
chiropractor is going to
muscle.
make
This
work.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, this is something. So I started going to other doctors,
Hmm.
and no
I,
doctor
I
around
I
here.
really I dislike the word doctors these days. Just in
Yeah.
general, like you know how it is when you're an athlete. I used to box. I've done a lot of things. I'm pretty healthy these days, I think, but I hate going to doctors.
Yeah.
I
Oh, me
just
too.
don't like it's the last resort for me. I would honestly, I'll sit home, be miserable, take everything over the counter or everything, honey, whatever I can do, just natural before I'm gonna go talk to the doctor. I just hate
Yeah,
it.
I am. My morning routine is pretty ridiculous. Like my husband teases me with my concoctions that I drink, my
Yep.
aloe vera
Yeah.
juice,
Good
apple
for you.
cider
Good for your stomach.
vinegar,
Yep.
I mean, I do all of that, supplements, all the things,
Yep.
very healthy.
Yeah.
Um, but I was really struggling. So fast forward, I finally found a doctor that said, I think you need to have an MRI. That MRI showed many lesions on my bones. Then our family was in New Orleans celebrating a wedding, and I got the call that they think I have cancer.
Mm,
So it was things very much started happening very quickly at that
right.
point. Within a week, I was in a hospital. They started diagnosing me not with cancer, but with all these other things.
Right. Right. I mean,
Fast
because
forward,
because medicine really is, it's a theory. They don't really know.
everything is a theory.
Yeah,
Well,
medicine
and
is really
so
that.
the things that I had going on with my body, none of it fit in any one
Any
lane.
one thing that they know of. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, okay, she's got this going on, she's
It's
got this going on,
overlapping
she's got
into
this going
multiple
on.
things.
Right.
Yep.
So ultimately, I had a very good doctor, um, who was a neurologist out of Texas. She said, you know, I think you guys need to step outside of Oklahoma to find
Right.
someone.
Yeah.
So the oncologist that I had here in Oklahoma started putting feelers out
Yeah.
and came upon a doctor at the Mayo Hospital in Rochester that said, I think you have something, or I think your patient has something called POEMS syndrome,
Okay.
POEMS,
Huh.
POEMS. And the way they treat that is kind of like a cancer. Part of it
Mhm.
is kind of like a cancer. So that afternoon, I had my first chemo treatment. 1 hour after my first chemo treatment, my daughter brings this to the hospital, and it had just been delivered by Amazon.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and then it was in that hospital bed because I was there for a week
Yeah. Yeah.
that I wrote The Wishing
Now
Bridge.
you have downtime while you're healing.
Right.
Yep.
So then The Wishing Bridge
Came
is
from
about,
that era. Yeah.
no, you're good. It's about a tree sprite who has a broken wing or a shattered wing. Um, so when people know that story, when they know what was going on with me
Yeah.
and they read The Wishing Bridge, that one's a tearjerker for
Yeah.
all my friends and family. Like it gets them every time. But writing that story really got me through some really tough stuff.
And you're good now, right? I mean, is there I mean, you just got to follow up with doctors. I mean, you're good
So
now.
Cohen syndrome is very rare. They say about 100 people in the world have it at a time. It
Okay.
is
I've
very,
never heard of it, and I've been around
most
medical my
people
whole life.
haven't.
Yeah, never heard of
Most
it.
people have not, even doctors.
Yeah,
My oncologist here in town had never heard of it
yeah,
before, and she's one of the top oncologists in Oklahoma. Um, I will always have poem syndrome. It will always exist in me. I could have flare-ups,
right.
but
So is
I
it
am
similar to
very,
like it's an autoimmune, obviously, right? It affects
it
the
is,
autoimmune
yes.
system.
Yeah.
Not it's probably sounds almost similar to almost what a fibromyalgia would be, maybe.
A bit, yes.
So
So,
again, that overlap of different things is what it sounds like. Yeah,
right, right.
yeah,
So
because I've never heard of
it
that.
deals with polyneuropathy, Oregon-Megaly, endocrinopathy, multiple myeloma, and skin.
Okay.
And to have poems, you have to have 4 out of the 5 areas affected, and each of those areas has sub
Yeah,
components. And so I had quite a few of them,
right.
but the neuropathy has gotten better. I still have uh, Like I can feel all my arms,
Yeah.
my legs. I had gone to where I couldn't feel from about here down on both of my arms. It's a symmetrical thing, which is
Right,
weird,
right.
but
So each
when you're
side is
dealing with
doing the same thing.
neurology, it's symmetrical. And I had lost feeling in my legs from about three-quarters of the way up my thigh, all the
Right,
way down. So now I just have numb feet, but I
right,
can
right.
still do, I can do so many of the things I did before now,
Yeah.
which I'm
Well, and that's
very,
the and that's the good thing, right? That's the good thing. Yeah.
very much so. Very much so. So, um, going back to the book,
Yep.
so once I got the wishing bridge out and they diagnosed me with poems, then we found out, okay, I'm gonna have to spend time at the Mayo Hospital in
Hmm.
Rochester. So before we did about 8 weeks in Rochester, my husband took us to Rocky Mountain National Park.
I love it there.
And
Yeah.
that is where we took photos and just had a nice little trip before going through the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in my life,
Hmm.
which was um, some really tough chemo
Yeah.
and a stem cell transplant.
Yeah. That's what a friend of ours, she's going through. She's in Oklahoma City right now doing stem cell. She's got a very rare, they're still not really sure the cancer, but she's going through that same thing right now. She's been through chemo that almost killed her a couple months ago, and they backed her way off the chemo, but it didn't affect the cancer. So now they're trying the stem cell.
Right. Hey, is it possible to pause for just a minute?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to run to the restroom because
Here we go. So now you guys made it to the Rockies Park
so we make it to Rocky
just
Mountain
before
and
treatment.
that's before treatment. And it's crazy to look back at those photos now because, gosh, hiking, I had to use poles. I had to
Right.
use my daughter. I couldn't walk up an incline.
All new
So
territory for someone who's been an athlete, their
it
whole life.
was
Yeah.
right. 2 years ago, I was doing Manitou Springs,
Yeah.
all the stairs in
Yep.
Colorado. And on this trip, we make it to the tundra and I can barely walk on the tundra.
Hmm.
So all the pictures are of me holding my daughter's hand,
Yeah.
holding a pole. My husband's behind me, making sure I don't
Holding
fall.
it up. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm too stubborn to not do it.
Right.
So it was like I will find a way.
Yeah.
But that story I wrote from when we were in Rochester at the Mayo Hospital. Um, the stem cell transplant, if you're healthy enough to handle it,
Yeah.
it's an outpatient procedure or program.
Hmm.
So we lived in our RV
Okay.
for the time we were up there. And I was so sick. Like we mentioned,
Yep.
chemo is it's just
It's
a bitch.
poison.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
it's a
poison.
chemo is a nice word for poison, really, because it
Right,
is. I mean,
right.
that's what they're doing.
A
Yep.
necessary poison
Yeah.
for some, unfortunately. So the chemo that they gave me made me incredibly sick. I was very ill for about 3 weeks. I lost 20 to 25 pounds
Yep.
in 3 weeks. I couldn't, I was so nauseous. I couldn't watch TV because
Just the
God
light and
forbid a
the
commercial, well, or if a commercial came on with food, or if someone was
right.
eating on
It just
TV,
made you nauseous. Yeah.
so much so. But what cancer did not take from me was the story in my
Yeah.
head. And we had just spent a week in this, in the beautiful Rockies.
Yep.
So I could close my eyes and I could picture all the places we had been. And the story had already started building in my head. So for these 3 weeks that I didn't want to get out of bed, that I was, getting sick in these nasty bags that the
Yeah.
hospital gave me, I wrote a story. And I didn't physically write it,
Yep.
but it played over and over and over in my head.
Yeah.
And whereas I was forgetting friends' names, I didn't know what day was
Hmm.
what. Sometimes I didn't know if it was morning or evening because I slept so long.
Right. Right.
but I never lost my focus on the story. And so that story is called Lost on the Alpine Tundra.
Yep.
And it will always have a very special place in my heart because it got me through some really, really tough days.
Yeah. I mean, the backstory for that is amazing. I mean, it's a beautiful story. It's, and it's great to see you're here and you're moving forth into your fourth book now,
Yeah.
which is
So the
again
fourth book was
amazing.
like yeah. I, so I, like I said, these stories were all coming out of my head, and then I got sick. So originally the idea was I want to find a publisher. I want to
Yeah.
find because I truly believe that this story that this idea has wings. It's unique. It's not been done before. National parks are so beloved. These
Yeah.
characters are precious, but no one's done tree sprites. It's all something I think without sounding completely arrogant, it's evolutionary. It's
Right.
it's unique and special.
Yeah,
Um,
you're right. There's nothing like this, right? There's people don't play on national parks anymore. I mean, like I said, you don't hear youth, not a lot. I mean, they're out there, but
no,
you don't have families running to national parks anymore like it used to be.
no. Well, and that's what I
The
was finding
phones
in
and
my
the tablets
classroom.
and the
I have
electronics is where
pictures.
everybody's at, right? I want to go to a national
Right.
park, I'm going to
I would have
Google it.
pictures of national parks in my classroom, and kids would go, "Is that a real place?"
Yeah,
Yes, it's a real place. It's
yeah.
here in America, and you can be
Yeah.
there in a day.
America,
But there's such a disconnect.
our nation has the most unique parks and forests and places. I mean, you can go from,
Oh,
the beaches in Florida, south, and even Texas, all the way to the north where you're at the border of Canada, which is just mind-blowing forest and rock and mountains.
incredible.
Our
I mean,
nation has so much beauty in it with just these natural geographical things.
absolutely. Absolutely. And they're adding more. We
Yeah.
just we just went to a national park in West Virginia that was very recently established as a national park
Wow.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean they're such incredible places. So anyway, back to the books on for book four. Um, my husband and I, once I was better and I still had to watch my interaction with
Yep.
people because my immune
Immune
system
system
was
was depleted. Yeah. Yeah.
completely
And that's what
tanked.
our friend's dealing with is she can't go around anyone.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you just have
Yeah.
to be, you
She's
have
been
to
in
be,
Oklahoma City almost a little over a month now. Like she's there. She can't go home. She's literally stuck there until it's
yeah,
over with. Yeah.
yep. No, we lived that
Yep.
exactly. Um, well, when we came home and I was better, I'm obviously a wanderlust person. I crave travel.
Yeah.
Um, so I told my husband I need to go somewhere. I know
Hmm.
we did Rocky Mountain, but I kind of went through a thing
Yeah.
and I need some sort of beautiful adventure. And we had never been to Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
And I
That's
knew Joshua Tree
It's
was
been a
very
few years for me,
fast.
but that is beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, we had no idea what to expect.
Hmm.
So we book it. And my favorite number is 29. And it just so happens that the town right outside of Joshua Tree is 29 Palms.
Yeah.
So I take all these little things as God winks. And
Yep.
I told Jason, I was like, that's a God wink to me. It's
Hmm.
29 Palms. We stayed and it was an Airbnb, this very cool, old, remodeled, silver. It wasn't an Airstream,
Right.
but it was I think it was called
It
a
was
Silver Stream.
similar. Right.
Yeah. And so we were out there for 5 or 6 days and very few people. I mean, this was
Mhm.
the first week of March in
Right. Right.
2024. And oh, I can't even, words can't do justice to what Joshua Tree is.
Uh-huh.
When you've got this vast desert, because it's
Yeah.
where the Colorado desert and the Mojave desert
Ties
meet.
together. Yeah. It's a massive expanse and
It's,
it's so
oh, it's
unique. Like you said, you can't describe it. It's just so unique to stand there. And
so
a lot of
unique.
people take that for granted. But last time I was there was several years back. And just to stand there, you don't have to say a word. You just look
No.
around and soak it in.
Well,
It's
and if you
it's
do a complete
crazy.
360, you've got you've got desert, you've got Joshua trees, you've got hills with these ornate
Yep.
cacti everywhere, these like red cacti that look like oblong basketballs, but
Yep.
are so unique. And then when you're driving and you go through these valleys, you'll have a valley of a different species of cacti that when you
Mhm.
go into the next valley, you don't see those anywhere. It's a
Yep.
completely different set of cacti. And then you're turning and you see snow-capped
Yep.
mountains in the distance. Where else do you get that?
Yeah. That
It
was
was just such a special place
I drove
that
through there, like I said, a couple years ago. I was coming home from Nevada and I drove south because it was winter time and I didn't want to be stuck going through Colorado. So I went south and cut through there. And so, like you said, it was the snow-capped mountains that I remember and the vast looking at everything going, man, I'm in the middle of this desert in the middle of the winter, but it's not. And then
right.
right next to me, I was in the middle of the winter, so everything was white in the background. And like you said, it's just such a unique area. It's such a unique area.
It's so beautiful. And um I knew a very little bit about what my story from Joshua Tree was going to be. And that came about when I was doing a checkup at the Mayo, which happened to be on my 40, see, it would have been my 46th birthday. 3 months after I had been sent home,
Yep.
I had to go back to Rochester for this checkup. And it was just just testing. And
Hmm.
as we were leaving the hospital that day, that I kid you not, this is how my brain works. The elevator doors opened and I'm in the best mood. I've just gotten
Yeah.
all great results. And I look down and it says Otis
Yep.
because that's what
The
elevators
company.
are.
Yep.
And so my husband and my daughter were there with me. Our son was here back home in Oklahoma. But I look down and I look to Jason and I look at Jenna and I went, Otis, that's the name of my tortoise. And it was like the elevator door starts to close and we haven't even
Yeah.
gotten out because we're just
Yeah.
all going, oh,
Right.
this is
Right. This
great.
big
This is
moment.
great. Yeah. And they're both like, that's
We've
the
named a new
greatest name ever
character.
for a
Yeah.
tortoise. Right.
That's
And
awesome.
then the way life works and the way, again, a God wink that just tells me that these are all the right things that are happening just as they should. Um, my illustrator, Dusty, when I've written A Surprise in the Desert, which is the Joshua Tree story.
Mhm.
Um, when I write the story and it's been edited fully and it's ready to go, I send it the entire story to Dusty because he and I share this brainwave of he knows I send him the pictures and then I don't give him a ton of direction
Right.
on how to place the characters on the pages. He
Yep.
just gets it.
He plugs it in exactly
He
what you're
plugs
looking
it
for.
in.
Yep.
So he sends me a message a couple of days after I sent him the story. And he said, I can't tell you how much I love this story. And I said, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And he goes, no. He goes, Jennifer, did you know that my son's middle name is Otis? And I went, are you freaking kidding me? And he goes, it's because he's named after my grandpa, Otis.
Ah,
And something about that got
just
my heart.
all
It
clicked. Yeah.
it just got my heart. And I went, oh my gosh, Dusty, this was this was meant to be.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just it was so good. And then when we launched A Surprise in the Desert this past February, I got to meet Grandpa Otis.
Oh,
He came to
yeah.
our launch party and
That's
it makes
amazing.
me emotional just because you can tell Dusty's family is incredible. But Grandpa Otis was everything, and here in my book, I'm celebrating this desert tortoise
Tortoise. Yeah.
his 100th birthday. And here's Grandpa Otis, this beautiful grandpa
Yep.
with the kindest eyes and just this gentle spirit. And when I got to read that book and see him there, and then see Dusty's son, little Lincoln
Yep.
Otis, it, you talk about a full circle moment
Yeah.
from
To tie
being
all
in
that
the
together
elevator
is
at
just
the
amazing.
Mayo
Yep.
to reading this book. It just, this is why I feel like being an author isn't easy. It's expensive.
Hmm.
It's
Oh yeah.
sometimes harshly excruciating,
Uh-huh.
but I constantly feel just this push, be it from God, the universe. It's just I know I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing,
Right.
whether these stories take flight one day or whether this is just my personal legacy for me and my family.
Right.
It's the most fulfilling thing other than having my children. It's
Hmm.
the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's exactly where you need to be, right? It sounds like your whole life you've known this, you've had this stirring, and this stirring has now come to life. And like you said, little things are like reminders to you, like this is where you need to be, Otis. This is where you need to be. You needed the trip to go see the Joshua Tree. You needed to be to have these things occur and be part of the story that you're presenting. It is where you need to be. It's where you've always been. And it sounds like you know that and you're comfortable now. You know, you go through careers. I mean, I've been in a million different trades and fields, but you go through things and you're like, this just isn't me, throughout life and you make changes. Um, but it sounds like you found exactly what your path is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I enjoyed teaching, but it wasn't, I would see other teachers who I could tell God put you on this earth to be a
To be that.
teacher.
Yes.
And I think God put me on this earth to be a storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
to listen to others and maybe not to tell their story precisely,
Yep.
but to use their essence, their most authentic tales.
Yeah.
I love weaving those into my stories in some way. And sometimes it's stories that don't even become the books.
Yep.
But I found that writing is such a comfortable, easy outlet for me that, I can be at a concert listening to music. We were at the Canes a couple nights ago,
Yeah.
and I'm listening to this band, and I mean, they're just playing this beautiful music. And in my mind, I'm writing a story
Yep.
of the girl that's to my right dancing, and she's holding her heart and her arms in the air.
Really
Her eyes
feeling
are
it.
closed.
Yep.
She was in another place. She
Yeah.
was she was living her story as I'm watching her, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing her story
Yeah.
while I'm listening to this music. And it is. I think when you hit a place like that, you realize this is where I'm supposed to be. This is that comfortable space.
Yes. And how often do we, throughout our lives, I mean, I'll be 50 next year. How often in our lives do we not recognize, we've been told our whole lives, find a career that you do something you love. Then it's
Mhm.
not a job, right?
Right.
And it sounds like that's exactly what you found. This isn't a job. This is life. This is what you enjoy. That so it becomes fun. You found the
What I get
moment
to do.
where what you enjoyed doing it,
Yeah.
and so then it does make your life a lot more, it makes it more important to wake up each day to do what you're doing and sharing what you're sharing. And I do, like I said, I think it's very important. I think the stories are amazing. Like you said, you're adding facts, you're adding imagination, but you're really bringing back to life something our nation has that a lot of people just can't experience or haven't experienced.
Right.
I think these books are really amazing. What does it look like in the future? Obviously, you're still going to tell stories. You've still got stories you're writing, I can tell, as you
Yeah.
said. What does it look like in the future? Are you doing kind of a planned release every couple of months, once a year, or are you just kind of right now just regrouping, getting the stories down?
So I wrote the first four books in kind of a fever,
Yep.
not knowing what life was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Poems, if not caught early, you can die within 3 years.
Yep.
So when I got that diagnosis, I really didn't know exactly what my life was going to be. So I started to go the actual publishing route
Yep.
and then realized this is going to take a lot of time. I don't know how much time I have. So I published all four of these books in about a year and a half,
Right.
a year and a half to 2 years, which is really unheard of. And I
Yeah.
don't exactly recommend it, but for me, it was what I needed.
Yeah.
So um, I told myself I'm for sure gonna write 10 books in the series, The Adventures of Twilla and Rye.
Very cool.
I've given myself grace to not write at such a fever pitch. I had a friend tell me last year, Jennifer, have you ever slowed down since you started this to appreciate what you've done?
Right.
And that sort of hit me hard because I hadn't.
Right.
And so I had to be pretty honest with myself, which I'm not always the best at doing.
Yeah.
Um, but I realized I did do something amazing. I didn't just write one beautiful book. I've written four.
Yeah. In a
Um,
time period that most people couldn't, to be real.
right.
Yeah.
While going through a sickness that most people couldn't imagine.
Yep.
And I don't try to dwell on that
No.
because I consider myself very fortunate, but I also have to look back and say, I went through something that could have killed me.
Yep.
You know, my doctor from the Mayo sits with me on an appointment and says, "Oh, honey, we spent so much time trying to keep you alive.
Yeah.
We never got to talk about what your life was going to be like when you went
After.
home."
Yeah.
That hits you in a different way
Yep.
when you're not in the thick of it. So I've given myself permission now to write one book a year.
Right.
So book five will be set in the Great Smoky Mountains,
Nice.
and it will come out in the spring of 2026.
Okay. Very good.
And then this summer, my husband and I kind of have an adventure planned where we're going to take a 2 week camping trip. I have convinced him to break out the tent and
Uh-oh.
get to school. But we're going to go to the national parks of the first three books. So Sequoia National Park, Arches National Park, and Rocky Mountain. And I'm going to work at trying to find how I can get my books into their gift shops, how
Yeah,
I can get books into some local bookstores.
for sure.
And my favorite thing, I love reading these stories to kids.
Yep.
It's the teacher in me.
Yeah.
Things I loved the most was story time. And when I go to schools and I have the opportunity to read the
To do
stories in
book
front of
read.
kids, that fills my cup like nothing else. And so, you know, I would love to branch out outside of the Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas region
Yeah.
and be able to read my stories all across the US.
I think
And I
that's
think
an
when you're a one man operation,
yeah.
that's what you have to do to get yourself out there. And I don't have a budget. I don't have a money tree in the
Right.
backyard, you know, so it's a lot of work. It's a
Yeah.
lot of money.
You have
But
good
it's a
support
dream.
is the good thing. You have the support there, like you said, and um, getting those into national parks, like you said, especially the ones correlated to the books. I think that's doable. I think that's feasible. I don't. I
I do too.
I really do. I don't see why any national park or the manager of that park at that point would be like, no, we can't do that. I mean, putting the story in a gift shop at a park that, they're not there for profit anyhow, those gift shops. They really aren't.
Right.
It's like even the Sequoia Park over here by us, there's a gift shop. It's closed half the time. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So I think that's feasible. I think that's a feasible goal. And I also think that again, you've created something that as the word spreads and this gets out, I think this is really amazing to share. And I think part of the reason I wanted to have you on the show is to be part of that sharing, to be able to help you to get this out there. We have quite a decent audience. Again, I've ramped this show up pretty high in the beginning when I first started. We were in the top 100 podcasts before the big Joe Rogans and the real big stuff that has time and money to do it. Now, we're not up there in the top 100 anymore, but I have a good audience and a um, good avenue. I'm on every platform. So we're able to share this stuff for you and get it out there. And that's what I'd like to do. And, obviously we'll promote it every way we can.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've my daughter Jenna, who did my characters, I've officially hired her. She's 16 now. So I've hired
Hey,
her
family
to
business, family
it's
business.
it is a full-on
I
family
love it.
business. And
I love it.
she needed a job, she needed gas money.
Yeah,
And so I said, "Hey, mom needs a social media director.
there you go.
Fit your schedule, you fit my schedule." And there's no one more invested than family.
Yeah, of
So
course.
she has been great at helping us build our Facebook, Instagram,
Yep.
Pinterest,
Yep.
TikTok,
And
all of
I've
the things.
got your links pulled up. I do have Twilla and Rye Facebook on here, so we'll mention that. I've got your Instagram, Twilla and Rye on Instagram as well. I've got those pulled up, but I also have the actual website, which is twillaandrye.com.
Yeah.
And that to discuss that a little bit before we get off here, this is where people can directly purchase your book.
Yes.
I also see on here it's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can purchase
Yes.
it right now. The other thing I noticed as I scrolled through your website and I was investigating it a little bit before we did the show, you also have free downloads on here, which I think is great for parents that are stay at home, parents that are homeschooling. These are things that people don't think about, little things like this. I love that you guys have the coloring page for the free download for Twilla. You have one for Rye. You have the Twilla and Rye coloring page. All of that stuff's amazing for stay
Yes.
at home and parents that homeschool. That is great activity, great stuff to get involved with their kids and also share this amazing story that is your story.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, being a teacher, um, I try to do things that will not only be fun for kids, but will be educational. So the coloring sheets, like I said, I have such an audience. I've done coloring sheets for the littles. I've done word searches for each book. And then I just recently worked with Tulsa Public Schools, and their third and fourth graders were doing diorama projects and research projects.
Very cool.
So I created a diorama project and a research project to go along with one of my books for
I th
that school.
This would be also something great for Epic Charter School. They have the younger grade crowds. I think this would be something great to look into for them. I know some of the kids and families get budgets that they can utilize and spend. I mean, this is definitely when my son started at Epic, that's what he did. Most of his learning fund went to books. My son loves to read. So we spent most of our learning fund was spent on books because he just wanted new books to read. And
Right.
so that again, another avenue is, Tulsa Public Schools, Epic Charter. That might be another avenue to kind of get these out there because I really do think this is an amazing tie-in that you've done, and that's why I think this is going to be successful.
I hope so. I hope so. That's why, the pieces at the back of the book, where in the back of book one, they make a daisy chain, and in the back of book two, they learn how to stack a rock heron. So you've got your manipulatives that kids are learning and your fine motor skills.
Yep.
And then you've got your conceptual things like in the back of book three, where we're teaching how to draw a fire safety escape plan in
Right.
your home. In the back of book four, you're learning your address and your phone number. So
Safety.
every book has something that goes along with it that is going to hit age levels of kids, hopefully from that 3 to 4 age range until you're 10 or 11.
I
Um,
I look
if
forward
nothing
to
else,
this.
it encourages kids to follow their dreams too.
So I'm a big movie buff and I love watching good movies and TV when I can. I look forward to seeing this on the screen.
You and me both.
I mean, this would really be a neat animated adventure uh, that could go so many different directions in one movie or one series. So
One of the biggest
I look forward to
compliments
the
that I
success
get
of
is
this.
thank you. One of the biggest compliments that kids give me all the time is as I'm reading, I'll notice that their eyes are actually closed. And when I'm done reading and kids raise their hands to ask questions, sometimes it won't be a question, but they'll say, I could see your whole story like a movie in my head.
Yep.
And that to me means that I have created a vision for them that the pictures were there, but I created a visual image with words
Yeah.
that they were able to take and develop their own story.
Yep.
And that's really special to me. I envision a movie as well. I kind of envision a drone coming down into the giant
Yep.
sequoia trees down onto the homes of Twilla and Rye one day.
I love it.
One day,
Hey,
yeah.
well, it will. It will. You just it's all the things you've put in motion. There's a reason and a purpose, and it'll get there, right? It's in the right moment. It will.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on Two Party Podcast. Again, when we when we wrap up, I will share all of the media stuff for you. I'll get all of this stuff loaded up with the episode and I'll get that over to you. But thank you for coming out. Is there one thing we always do? We always ask one question at the end of the show. If there's one thing that you could share with our audience, life experience, if there's one thing you could share with the audience that might help one person in our audience today, what would that one thing be?
Gosh.
Sometimes it's a tough question for people, but I always like to leave on that note because I really feel like our show contributes to, if we're not helping a couple people, I always try to at least know that I'm trying to help one person and our guests are able to contribute to that.
I guess with everything I've gone through, um, from having being given the courage to quit my job, to writing these stories, to getting sick, getting through all of that. Um, don't be afraid to lean on your people. Don't be afraid to lean. I'm very independent. I'm very stubborn.
Yeah,
I was always one to kind of like the little kid. I can do it myself. I got
yeah,
this. Um, very much the Ironman mentality. I can do this. I can do this. Just push through. Just
yep.
push through. Um, but there are some things where you've got to give yourself a little bit of grace, and it's not it's not being weak to rely on other people sometimes that's just what you need to
Mhm.
get through a rough patch.
I love it.
So
I
don't
love
be
it.
afraid to rely on others.
I
And I
love
think
it.
that's a Twilla and Rye kind of a theme with Twilla and Rye as well. They trust each other. They're best friends and adventure buddies. They have to count on one another. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to count on one another.
I agree. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I will definitely, what we also like to do is have our guests come back on in about a year. We try to get people back on in a year and revisit and see where things have grown. And so we'll definitely want to welcome you back in about probably a year, or if not sooner.
Sounds great.
All right. You have a great day.